So I'll only be honest with you guys. I actually I was vacillating whether or not I should even talk about what I'm planning on talking about tonight, because I think it's intense, and I think it might be a little disturbing. But I decided ultimately that you guys are adults, and you guys could hear what I have to say on this issue. And the question is really, the way to start, I think, is we have. We talked about faith, and we talked endlessly about the different kinds of faith, 9 different kinds of faith we came up with, and purpose, and meaning, and God, and all that, and Emunah. And we have so many of our brethren who don't believe. And maybe if you were to ask them, do you believe? And they might say yes, they're not atheists, of course. But do they really believe? Do they have the Emunah like we talked about? Does it impact their behavior? A lot of people it doesn't. A lot of people don't change their behavior because of God. So the question I want to ask today is, why is it, or how is it possible that our nation has so many people that don't believe? What went wrong? And I think we can even backdate this question throughout Jewish history. We find in biblical times Jews who had a much more heightened sense of spirituality than we do. Yet we find them committing idolatry. And idolatry is the absolute rejection of God in the most cruel and brutal fashion. That's it. It means it's pledging your allegiance to a deity that's not God, to a pagan, bowing down to statues, and that wasn't common. It was out of the ordinary, but it existed. Now the question is, how is that possible? What went wrong? What about someone compels them to reject God? And I think we could ask the question, like we said, backdate the question. But I think even today,
the forces.
Okay, well, let's see what those forces are. But let me give you an example here. The Talmud calls the Jewish people, the Jewish nation, ma'aminim b'nei ma'aminim, which means like the word emunah, people of faith. Descendants of people of faith. Faith is in our bones. It's in our DNA, right? It's who we are. We are a people of faith. Yet we see today that many of our co-religionists, whatever how you pronounce that word, co-religionists don't have that faith. What went wrong? So I want to just ask a question here. Let's ask this question. The people that don't have faith. People say, I don't believe in God. Are they motivated? What's motivating that stance? Is it pursuit of truth, or is it something else? The people in the world, that they declare, or they determine, or they decide, or they just believe that there is no God.
Well, some people are atheists.
Okay.
And some people have had possibly bad results and decided God didn't exist.
That's a good example. So someone had a bad experience. Does that prove that God doesn't exist?
To them?
No, it doesn't really prove it. I'm saying logically it doesn't prove it.
A lot doesn't prove that God does exist.
True. I would agree that experiences aren't necessarily, unless this experience is prophecy, right? But if someone has a bad experience with a religious Jew, that doesn't prove that God doesn't exist. Right? You have a religious Jew who says, I believe in God, and then he swindles someone else in business. That say, oh, look at these Jews, But that doesn't prove anything, right?
It proves that person was not.
That proves that person
is dishonest.
And what does that even prove? That proves that someone who doesn't follow the Torah and masquerades as someone who does, right? How dangerous and damaging is that for Torah?
Yeah.
Because when people say, oh, look the way the Jews behave, and then they link the behavior that's associated with the Torah with the guy who's not behaving with the Torah,
right?
How much more damage does that cost?
That's a lot.
But the fact that someone has a bad experience doesn't really prove it. It's not logic, right? Pursuit of truth in a logical manner does not mean that no experience, no behavior would necessarily disregard any sort of belief, correct? So what's motivating them? What is motivating people? I mean, what is guiding them? Is it pursuit of truth? Maybe.
You talk about why people don't believe in God?
Yeah, or why do people, what process do people undertake to arrive at their conclusion? And I would, by the way, I would lean to that also, not just people that don't believe in God, but even people who believe in God.
Experiences.
Well, but experiences is not, okay.
How about upbringing?
Upbringing.
Yeah, you
That's
grow up in a
very
house,
powerful.
You know, a Christian Scientist or who knows what.
But what does upbringing tell us? Upbringing means is that they haven't really made a decision. They're just going with the default. They were indoctrinated with a certain position, and then they just never changed. So they never determined anything. But the Jews that, let's say, decided in antiquity to reject God and reject Torah, what was motivating them? So we find in the Talmud something very interesting.
It's the Gava.
Okay, listen to what the Talmud says here. This is the Talmud that talks about idolatry. It's in Sanhedrin in the 60s. It says like this. The Jews always knew that there was no substance in idolatry. Now, idolatry to us is the most irrational thing a person could do. You see a little idol on the side, you say, bow down to that. Someone sent me pictures from, they went to the Far East, and they were in a Buddha temple, which, by the way, they shouldn't walk in there because that's a house of idolatry. But they really see people praying, bowing down to little figurines. It's so crazy.
In India, it's the cow. I mean,
It's the cow, but you know.
I know, but
my dad would tell me when he went to India, he sees in office buildings, there's these little elephants.
Right.
And to us, that doesn't make any sense. How could we accord power to something that you make yourself in a factory? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I had a Hindu explain to me that they believe in the same God we do, and all these other things are just representations of other different aspects of God, but that they just believe in the one God.
Okay, so that's actually, it's interesting, that parallels how Maimonides describes the development of idolatry. Idolatry didn't start off as people starting to worship the sun, the moon, the stars, or any other forces. Rather, they said, oh, the Almighty wants us to give honor to the wonderful creations that He made. So He made the sun, and it's so powerful and so wonderful. Let's also honor the Almighty by honoring the sun. And eventually, after several generations, people forgot to take that last step. Dave?
We can see the sun. We can see the moon. We can see the trees. We can't see God.
Okay, so that makes it harder for us to believe in God. But the initial mistake was not that they abandoned God, rather they just accorded honor because they made the miscalculation.
They wanted something to visualize.
Yes, exactly.
They wanted a visualization.
They wanted an easier job. Easier.
Yes,
And
and
we
that's
can't
how
get
the
it.
Hindus believed. It's all a visualization
they wanted
of
something
the
to hold
power
on.
of God.
So the Thomas is like this. Go ahead.
Like Egel Zahav, it's like the golden calf.
It's some sort of incarnation, right? In some God incarnate.
Me.
That's right. The Talmud says something else. Listen to this, guys. The Talmud says that the Jews always knew that there was no substance in the idolatry. It wasn't real. So why did they worship it? They only worshipped it because that allowed them to be frivolous with sexual sins.
Okay.
Really? That's what the Talmud says.
I don't get that.
You don't get that. Okay.
Just the
What's that
last,
mean?
This
just
is
the
the
last
adult
statement.
comment we're going to get.
Yeah, well,
The adult.
So what it means is like this. If you believe in the Jewish God, you believe in the Torah. That is very demanding on your behavior. Because, okay, you're bound. You can't eat this, you can't do that, you can't sleep with this or with that or with the other, right?
Right.
Their ultimate goal was the illicit sexual relations. That's what they really wanted. It's just, to them, it was a contradiction. You can't believe in God and in Torah and behave in a way that's entirely, that's entirely opposite to that.
Immoral.
It's entirely immoral. That's right. Entirely, antithetical to God and Torah.
Yeah.
So therefore, they said, let's forget about God and Torah. Let's believe in this idol. Although the whole world believes in these idols. Let's take this idol is now the deity, and he doesn't say anything about who I'm allowed to sleep with, what I'm allowed to do.
So you're saying,
And now I can do whatever I want.
you're saying the basis of culture was all around sex.
I'm sorry? What?
So you're saying the basis of all the people that came into being was all related to illicit sex.
When the basis
Well, I
of
mean-
the Jews committing idolatry. I'm not talking about other people, but the Jews. The Talmud's talking specifically about Jews.
Okay.
As to why Gentiles do idolatry, that might be a different thing. It might be linked to what what Maimonides described with Abraham, or with Abraham's predecessors, the mistake that was made. It began in a theological manner and spiraled out of control. But the question is about the Jews.
Okay,
Jews
sorry.
have faith in their DNA. The Talmud says, so how are they behaving otherwise? How are they doing idolatry? And the Talmud answers is that yes, it wasn't. They did the math, they did the logical, and they contrasted the legitimacy of faith in God versus the legitimacy of belief in an idol, and they actually weighed all the possibilities, they did all the algorithms and all the math, and they said, it's more likely that this idol has power than the invisible God. That's not the approach. The approach was that I really want X. Believing in God and Torah, this allows me to have X, I need alternatives. The Torah says, okay, well, a lot of people in the world believe in this, think, okay, well, this is good enough. Let's believe in this, and now I can do whatever I want.
Rabbi, I think, if you're looking at more modern times, I was wondering also about taking the skewed view of science. I think a lot
We'll
of
get to
people
science. We're going to have to
Yeah,
talk
that's
about
another
science.
thing.
That's right.
Mhm.
That's the next thing we're going to talk
Okay,
about. We're going
alright.
to bring this down to modern times. That's where it's going to get a little fun, I hope. So let's ask you a question. So let's say we have these people in ancient Jewish life, and they are bowing down to idols and worshiping idols and giving libations for idols and sacrificing stuff for idols. And they're Jews, so we walk over to them and say, hey, excuse me, sir, do you really believe in this idol? Do you really believe it or not? What would they say?
Yes.
Well, they would
So-
say yes, if they wanted to continue on with their lifestyle the way they wanted their lifestyle to be.
No, but if you ask them genuinely, do you believe
Genuinely,
it?
I don't
So you say
see how
yes,
they
and
could.
Wendy says no, right?
Well,
Because
I don't know.
because they're really motivated with something other than theology, right?
Right.
So what time frame are you asking when you ask?
I'm talking about when the Jews
Ancient.
were doing idolatry.
he's
I'm
talking
talking
about
about.
ancient.
Way before the Jewish experience, are you talking about?
No, I'm talking about the
After Mount Sinai?
the 800 to 900 years from Moses
Okay.
till the men of the Great Assembly. That's where we have all the stories in the Bible where the Jews were doing idolatry. Some Jews were doing, not all of them. Some Jews. When the Jews were doing, now no Jews do idolatry. No, maybe different forms that we get to in a second.
Yeah.
But if you ask the question of a Jew in antiquity who is worshiping an idol, the Talmud gives a bunch of stories about people that were worshiping idols. Really, genuinely, like they worship their idols. Really, like it's hard to imagine Jews would do that. But if you were to ask them, why are you doing that? They would say, because it's true. So they would respond.
They would.
They would.
Okay.
What the Talmud is doing here, the Talmud is plumbing to the deep depths of someone's consciousness and saying, what is really motivating them? Of course, externally, people will say, I believe in X because I think X is true. But at the core, says the Talmud, it was really all about permissiveness. That's what it really was about. The permissiveness drove them to come to theological conclusions.
Okay.
But the point is like this. These people were unaware of their own biases. They had no idea. If you were to ask them, what do you really believe? They would say, I really believe that this deity is powerful. I really believe it. And they would defend it. They actually worshiped it. But the point is, the Talmud is saying, what really motivated them was permissiveness. That's what really motivated them. And how did that manifest? It manifested in the form of idolatry. And we have a principle elsewhere in the Torah already establishes this idea that when someone has a bias, when someone is bent on a certain outcome in a pursuit, they might not even be aware of their own biases. And that outcome is what they'll achieve. Think of this question. We have a criminal case in court. So there's a defense attorney and there's a prosecuting attorney. Both of them create an argument to their own side. That's only possible if pursuit of truth is not what's motivating them.
Yeah.
Right? So we designed a judicial system where we are pitting the brightest minds against each other, and pursuit of truth is on no one's agenda.
It's win your case, yeah.
And that's insane. That's what the Torah, Torah doesn't have this idea of, of the judges or the bright minds trying to lobby one way or the other. Because as a defense attorney, your job is to find a defense argument for your client. What if the guy's guilty?
And
So what?
Happens all the time.
It doesn't matter. But it really ought to matter, no? The guy's guilty, they should
They
be
should,
persecuted.
right.
They should be prosecuted and punished for what they did.
Yes.
The answer is that this is an example of how someone can argue vociferously for something that
It's not true.
is not true.
Yeah.
And because pursuit of truth is not really what's motivating them. What's the matter with that, Howard?
Nothing, I hate that system.
But it's really motivating people to do something, which to us would be, how could we encourage that?
Yeah.
Well, that's the system that we have. But this is an example of people arguing in favor of something that maybe isn't true at all. And they might not even be aware of their own biases. So we have the story of Eleazar. Eleazar, quickly. The story of Eleazar in Genesis, he is sent to go find a spouse for Isaac. Now remember, Eleazar has a daughter. Eleazar has a daughter,
Yeah.
and he wants his daughter to marry Isaac.
Yeah, that's right.
Eleazar, after all, is Abraham's prime disciple. Who would be a better choice for a father-in-law for Isaac than someone who's Abraham's right-hand man? And Eleazar asks Abraham, okay, you're sending me east to find a spouse for Isaac. But what if she doesn't want to come back? Ulai, perhaps she doesn't want to come back. What do I do then? Which is a bizarre question. Abraham's sending you to a mission, go do the mission. Why is he asking the question?
It's a bias.
Right? Why? Wait. So Abram tells him, "Oh, don't worry. If she says she doesn't want to come back, you're exonerated from your pledge. Fine." He goes east, and he meets Rebecca, and he says, "Give me some water," and she gives him water, not for him, not only for him, but for his camels. He meets the parents and the brother, and they have a whole back and forth. And he tells the whole story. It starts with Abraham. Abraham commanded me to go find a wife for Isaac. And I asked the question, Ulai, perhaps the girl won't want to come back with me. If you look at the spellings of those two words, Ulai, number one, when he was dealing with Abraham, and number two, when he repeats it to the family of Rebecca, it's spelled differently.
What does Ulai mean?
Ulai means perhaps.
Okay.
But the first instance spelled with a vav, Ulai with a vav, and the second instance spelled Ulai without a vav, which can also be pronounced Eli, which means to me. So Rashi tells us that the reason why it's spelled without a vav, when it's spelled that it could be pronounced Eli, even though it also could be pronounced Ulai, is to tell you that here Eliezer recognized that when he was asking Abraham, what do I do if the woman doesn't want to come back with me? What he really was asking was Eli, to me. If the girl doesn't come back, Isaac's mine. I'll have him marry my daughter. At the time where Eliezer asked the question, what do I do if the girl doesn't want to come back? If you were to stop him and say, why are you asking that question? What would he say? Well, it's a good question. What do I do if the girl doesn't come back? It's illegitimate.
Find someone else.
Yeah, well, whatever. I'm saying that's a good question to ask,
But he had
right?
an ulterior motive, of course.
Later on, when he recounts the story, he realizes, the reason why I was asking that was really because I wanted, in my heart of hearts, that Isaac should marry my own daughter.
So it should be backward. The first one should be without.
Well, this is when he's saying it. That's the point. You're right.
Yeah.
When he's saying it, right? When he says it the first time, that's what he's thinking. Ulai. Later on, when he's repeating it, he's thinking back about what happened. It clicks. What I was really saying was Eli. So this means like this. Even someone like Eliezer. Remember, Eliezer is a student of Abraham. He's someone, obviously, he's very well grounded intellectually. He's motivated by intellectual. Even him, he's not aware of his own biases until afterwards. Unless you have what's called a cheshbon nefesh, unless you have a recollection of your behavior, you relive what you did, only then can you unmask the true motivation.
How do you relate that back to your idolatry?
Okay, my point is that this. The people that were doing idolatry in yesteryear had no idea that the real reason why they were supporting these idols was because they wanted the illicit sex. They had no idea.
There was a
To them, they were really arguing, oh, well, this seems logical. They were really making that argument.
So there was a bias there, and you're
They had an ulterior
That's
motive.
right.
But
They were motivated by the permissibility of what the Torah prohibited, and therefore they found an excuse. Let's translate this to modern times. People today don't genuflect to idols. They don't. Does that mean that there's no more excuses? Does that mean that people are not biased today? Most people today are more biased. So what are today's excuses? What would an excuse that a Jew today would say?
It doesn't fit into-
Maybe I'm not obligated. What would the excuse be today?
sorry.
Well, yeah, science.
Science
What about
is one.
materialism? Love of materialism.
But that's not an
Money.
excuse.
Well, I mean,
I
it's a
was-
reason.
Excuse.
It's a reason.
So I want to
I don't
piggyback.
believe in God.
Well, you
I
don't believe in
don't
God.
believe in
Why?
Torah.
But you can't just say you don't believe in God. You have an alternative to say, well,
Or the-
evolution explains
You
it
got
all,
people that are
right?
going there.
Evolution
Torah doesn't-
explains it
Evolution
all,
plus Big
or
Bang.
I
Right.
haven't seen it with my own eyes, or I haven't been touched, or it doesn't affect me personally.
Or
How about
the rabbis invented the oral Torah.
The rabbis invented
You've
it.
ever heard the term rabbinic Judaism?
Yeah.
What does the term rabbinic Judaism mean?
Rabbis
Who invented
Rabbis.
Judaism? The
Yeah.
rabbis invented that.
I was just going to say, maybe another reason would be, the Torah doesn't apply to me today. It's a book from, antiquity, and it doesn't apply to me.
It's not relevant today.
Not relevant.
Torah is not relevant.
Better
right?
word, yeah.
Or
Not
the Torah is
relevant.
not true. Documentary
Not true,
hypothesis, right?
yeah.
It wasn't
That
even
would be a
written.
better reason. that
Right?
it's-
But are these really in pursuit of truth
No.
or not? Are they really in pursuit of truth, or are they a form of bias? Are they an excuse? Now, this is a hard question to answer. This ought to be unsettling, because everything that we do, we rationalize. Every stance, every behavior that we take, we want to feel comfortable with what we're doing. So we have to find a way to say, I'm good enough. I'm doing it. Anyone who's more religious, well, they're fanatics. They're doing more than they need. Anyone who spends their whole life studying Torah, that's outrageous. That's a bit too much. But maybe they're right. Maybe we're just giving that excuse because we want to watch football. That's what we want to do. And that's just an excuse. And I'm saying there's an entire spectrum of that. You said people say, well, I want to drive in Shabbos. That's what they really want to do. They don't want to be cooped up at their house.
Yeah.
So driving is not prohibited on Shabbos. That's what they'll make the argument. Either they'll say it's not prohibited on Shabbos, or, well, does it say the Torah that driving on Shabbos is prohibited?
Yeah.
What's really motivating? Is it really a pursuit of truth? Do they even really study it? Do they even know what it's based upon? Or is it just an excuse? Or people say, I'm saying you could go up and down the spectrum, right? People that want to intermarry. Well, you'll say, well, the synagogue today does intermarriages. It's the rabbi doesn't.
They do worse.
Certain rabbis.
They do worse.
They do worse
Yeah.
things,
Yeah.
right? Does
But
that
that's my opinion.
is that really pursuit of truth? Well, what does the Torah actually say about intermarriage? What does it say? What's the Torah's true perspective? Now, that's obviously uncomfortable for a lot of people to hear, right? But the question, and it's very uncomfortable to hear that we are motivated by biases, but it's true. It's true for every single one of us in this room. Every single person on the planet is subject to this. And this is the reason why Jews don't have faith. I would argue this is the reason why Gentiles don't have faith, even though they're it's on a lower level. Right? We today, even though we don't have idolatry, we have other excuses. We have other biases. We have other ways other hooks to hang our biases on. Today, no one believes in idolatry. Does that mean that everyone's forced to accept God? No, we'll come up with other creative solutions.
Well, we also have people that their main purpose is to prove the non-existence of God. That are out there preaching that.
Oh yeah.
What's the
Yeah.
guy, the famous
The
scientist? The guy in the...
Scientology?
Yeah, what is his
No,
name?
but the guy that's in the thing.
Hawking, Stephen Hawking?
Yeah.
Hawking, yeah.
That's
I mean,
his whole
that's what he
life.
does. That's his whole claim to fame, is that.
He's a pure scientist.
And,
Yes.
but what does that say? When you have someone who's a brilliant scientist, and no one's gonna argue that he's
Yeah.
not.
Right.
Well, he says, he believes in evolution, he believes in Big Bang, right? Those are excuses, or not excuses, but those are alternatives to God, right?
Right.
Once you couple Big Bang
With evolution.
with random evolution, voila, you kind of avoided what you were forced to accept otherwise.
Yeah.
Now, I'm saying, we're not judging the merits of their argument just yet. But either way, this, were it to be untrue, random evolution and
Big guy.
Big Bang, right? This it still provides enough cover, so to speak, for someone to fulfill their biases. And look at that, you have a brilliant scientist who believes in it.
And he's not the only one.
Well, there's
Yeah,
a lot
there's
of
lots
brilliant
of them,
scientists
yeah,
that
yeah.
believe in it.
That's what I've said.
So what does that
Science is
mean?
an issue.
That means that some segment of the population will agree with them.
Well, the question is not just who will agree with, that people will agree with them. People agree with a lot of retarded things, right? Not to say that that's retarded, I'm saying, but,
Too late.
okay, not necessarily. I'm saying, I think it's absolutely insane to think that, and we'll get to discussion of evolution, because that's a discussion that's relevant to to what we discussed till now. But I think to someone to actually believe that all life on this earth came from a single amoeba,
Yeah, it's impossible.
I think that's crazier than bowing down to a little figurine and saying this created the world.
Yeah.
I think it's crazier.
Rabbi,
To say
Why?
that everything was evolved from an amoeba.
From
Yeah.
a single amoeba,
Yeah.
that's right.
Just
And then
one
we're going
of
through that a little bit today. I think I'll stick by my words. I think that's retarded.
It is.
Now, but what if you do with a lot of brilliant people that believe that? Well, that provides sufficient comfort. And by the way, I want to make the argument that the Almighty wants it like this. That's where free will comes into play. The free will is not whether or not it's true or not, if we were pursuing truth. The free will is what tools are we going to employ in our journey. If we employ just our rational, reasonable intelligence, we'll arrive at the truth. If pursuit of truth is what's motivating us, we'll get there. If we are motivated by a pursuit of pleasures that are not allowed by the Torah, we'll get there as well. How we'll get there? We'll find a way. We'll be forced to find a way. And even if that means creating models that are so outrageous to say that without any guidance, one amoeba turned into 8.7 million species, that is insane.
Yeah.
It's insane. But we'll get there if we need to get there. If I'm compelled to get there, I'm the defense attorney for pleasure, right? I'm paid for. Who's paying my bills? Right? What's motivated? What end do I have to reach? If it's one that obviously for God, I'll get there, no matter what. So back in yesteryear, it was idols. Today it'll be some other model that obviously for God.
Rabbi, there's another
So,
little
go
fact.
ahead.
Can I just mention this little fact? I thought about this because we had a discussion in our Sunday class about this too. The fact that people don't believe in life after death. And therefore, a lot of people live for today, and they don't think about, and it kind of piggybacks, onto what you're talking about, immorality and all the rest of it. Because, hey, I'm going to do what's good for me today,
Yeah,
because I have no accountability.
That's very logical.
Yeah.
Let's assume all you want, you were motivated by pursuit of carnal pleasure, then consequences for those activities would be a hindrance. And one way to get rid of the hindrance is to say, well, there is no consequences.
There's no accountability.
There is no
Yeah,
consequences.
right.
But that's not necessarily logical, right? Logically, we have to ask the question, is there more reason to believe that there is life after death or not?
I'd like to have
Huh?
a discussion with you on that.
Okay, let's go. But in this module of our discussion, we just finished talking about God. Okay, so what phantom reality is today's version of idolatry in the capacity of allowing someone to hang their hat on a certain excuse to allow them to pursue their pleasure? So I think we talked about, for example, rabbis made up the oral Torah. Right? That's a very rabbinic Judaism. That's very common to hear today. And
Rabbis
it's-
made up the whole Torah.
or the whole Torah.
People of the generation.
That's right. There was
made
a
it all
documentary
up.
about this. There was 4 authors. It was based upon some stories
There
and
you
history,
go.
and it was
That's
put
it.
together by some redactor. And a lot of people claim that, and that's going to be. By the way, we're going to have a discussion about this in our next module that
Okay.
we do when we talk about Torah,
Good.
Okay.
because a lot of people say that, and I want to make the argument that it's illogical.
Yeah, it is.
It's not based upon reason, right? And we're going to have a third module talking about reward and punishment. And the people that say they don't believe in reward and punishment, that's another excuse.
That's right.
Because all these excuses enable someone to do what they want, which may be pursuit of pleasure. This is a hindrance. They'll have to find a way. Life will find a way to achieve what it wants to achieve. The defense attorney will find some sort of argument to make the guy guilty. He knows he's not. To make the guy innocent. He knows he's guilty. Everyone knows he's guilty. Pursuit of truth doesn't matter. If I want something, that trumps my pursuit of truth. Unless what I want is truth, then I'll get there. So let's discuss a little bit about one more question before we get into the actual issues. Just some points. What do you do with someone like that? What do you do with someone that's biased? How do you engage in a discussion with that?
Or you try and find something that you do have in common too.
Okay,
Start a
but when you
conversation
will
with-
discuss the issues,
Yeah.
and the issues don't really matter, because no matter how much logic you present,
It's a
if they are avoiding the logic, you're not on the same wavelength.
Okay.
So what do you do? I found something very interesting. I mean, you can argue someone until you're blue in the face. You can really argue and argue, but if you guys are working with different premises, you'll never agree. The defense attorney, the prosecuting attorney will never agree. Why don't they have that? You know, say, I think you're right. How come that never happens? It never happens. Like, you know what? You're right. I resign from the case. Why don't they do that? Because that is their presupposition. The presupposition is the guy's innocent, and let's find a way to get there. Let's find a way to get to that destination. Once that's assumed, you'll find a way to get there. And then everything else the other guy says is insane, because I already assumed the opposite. Pursuit of truth is not being discussed. If you're going to have an argument with someone, and they are determined that the result be X, nothing you could possibly say will convince them otherwise.
Do you walk away under that scenario?
So what do? Do you argue till you blue in the face?
You walk away?
What do you do?
You walk away?
Right? If someone is not willing to listen to the truth. So I have 2 approaches, I think. I think the first approach is we have a Mishnah in the book of the chapter of the Fathers, where we're instructed, Da mashe tashiv la'apikoros. Know how to respond to an apikoros. Apikoros is a heathen, heretic. Now, what does that mean? That seems to say that you engage in debate. You gotta know how to respond. That's not what it says. If you listen carefully, it says,
Yeah, I also-
know what to respond to the apikoros. Da mashe tashiv la'apikoros. It doesn't
Know
say
what-
respond to the apikoros.
Know what
Know
to
what to
respond.
respond.
It says you
Your
have
response
to
may be
know
walking
what the
away.
response would be,
Yeah.
but you don't respond because it's futile.
Yeah.
If someone is an apikoros, if they are determined to not listen to what you're saying, don't say it. Know what to say, but don't say it. That's what's being demanded of us. That's not, I think, the first response. And the question is, what if someone is apikoros? Right? What if someone already is the defense attorney, so to speak, for their permissive way of life? What do you do then? How do you navigate that? So I think there's another approach, which I think, this is more of experimental, but I think that there is this idea of having a debate, of trying to disassociate the debate with its conclusion, or with its implications. If I told you, God forbid, right, we're going to have an argument, but the stakes are, if you're wrong, you know, you're going to have to lose one of your children. There's no way that they'll ever agree. Right? They'll never. If I convince you that you're wrong on any issue, right? I convince you you're wrong, you're going to lose one of your kids.
Never gonna happen.
Well,
You'll find a way to argue, right?
Yeah, you're never
yeah,
gonna
it's
happen.
The
not,
stakes are
you're
too
not
high.
going to convince the person.
The stakes are too high, right?
Lower the.
So what's the problem? The problem is that someone, I'm a pleasure seeker. That's what I want. If the implications of the argument are that my pleasure goes away,
You're not going to agree.
I'm not going to agree. It's too valuable for me. as humans, we're pleasure seekers. That's what we are. If someone is being told that if you lose this argument, you're going to lose the pleasure, it's essentially what we're being told is that you're being locked out of life, so to speak, because life is a pursuit of pleasure. So I think the problem that someone has with actually engaging in this debate, honestly, is that in their heads, the implication of the debate is that, okay, if God is in Torah is true, my life is miserable. I can't drive on Shabbos, I can't eat whatever else I want. I lose out all the pleasures. But if they are open to the idea of spiritual pleasures, which the Torah tells us, right? We have lots of sources to this, that even this our approach is that we're pursuing pleasure. That's also our approach. It's just we have higher levels of pleasure. The Torah is guiding us to be higher levels of pleasure. A kid, right? What does a kid want? Candy. What do they want more? More candy. That's all they want. Adults, we also want candy.
Yeah.
It's just that our candy is a little more sophisticated. We want money, we want prestige, right? We
Material
want
things.
Material things. But essentially we're the same organism. We're working with the same rules. It's just that our pleasure concepts have been upgraded. Judaism and Torah is also about getting those candy bars. It's just they're not candy bars and they're not fancy cars or prestige. It's a higher level of pleasure. It's a more delicate level of pleasure. You talk about love. Is love a pleasure? Yes. Define it. What do you feel?
You can't.
Well, it's very hard to define because it's not material. It's not like you feel good because your taste buds, right? It's much more nuanced, subtle than that. That's a higher level of pleasure. The Torah talks about the highest levels of pleasure. Higher than love even. Okay, wow. If that's the implication of the conclusion that God is true, Torah is true, maybe people will be more willing to hear. And then what's experimental? So those are the two options. Either you can't respond because you have to know what to respond, but if someone's unwilling to listen, then you can't talk. What if someone wants to be willing to listen? They have to realize that when they opt into God and Torah, if that's the reasonable result of their conclusion, they're actually going to be presented with higher levels of pleasure that they couldn't have achieved otherwise. The Torah essentially is a manual book for pleasure. But wait a minute, Rabbi, all the things that you can't do is included in the Torah. Well, do you think that a chocolate bar is pleasurable? Yeah. But can you have 15 of them?
No, diminishing returns.
Right? Why not? It's more and more and more pleasure. Yes. But when you really want to have the higher levels of pleasure, you want to withhold the lower levels of pleasure.
Yeah.
Because they're going to come into conflict. The Torah tells us all the people we can't sleep with and all the foods we cannot eat. Right? That is an exercise in maturity, in upgrading our standards of pleasure. And the third thing, which is the experimental thing, which is we have to find a way to have a conversation based upon logic without consequences of implications. So it means I want to think perhaps, this is experimental I said, I want to think perhaps, can we have a real debate? It might not be possible. Is there some way to circumvent the biases? Is there some way to have a debate based on pure reason? Means not taking any conclusions and not having any implications of the conclusion. I don't know if it's possible. Maybe. I have to think about this. Is it possible? You guys tell me if you think it. Dave is nodding his head no. It might not be possible. But if there would be a way to have a discussion, but the implications of the discussion never come into the dialogue of the debate, then maybe there's room to talk. I don't know if that's possible. Maybe yes, maybe no.
Well, that's probably why we have a jury.
Yeah,
Because you can't have a negative and a positive side and have no conclusion.
that's right. But the question is who are the brightest minds in the room? Right. Our problem with our jury system is the people that are smart don't end up.
Right,
juries.
I agree with you.
That's unfortunate. We're going to have the people that are most or most easily swayed, or most average. That's what I was
But
gonna say,
if you
Wendy.
can figure out a system that's better, like.
So what the Torah system is that you have 3 unbiased judges.
Right.
We read about, you guys read that a few weeks ago.
Right.
Last week you read about it, right? How the most important thing to have in a
But
judge
they're
is
still
not be
judges.
biased.
But they're still a jury, kind of. They're judges.
They're judges, but that's the one thing that disqualifies them. Why? Because then you can't talk. Reason doesn't matter. Truth doesn't matter if you're biased.
Right.
Truth and bias are opposites.
Problem is finding the unbiased judges.
That's it.
Look at the Supreme Court, you got 4 people who are always gonna vote one way, 4 people always gonna vote another.
And you got the swing vote from Roberts, and that's what this
Anthony
guy.
Kennedy decides what happens.
Or
in
Roberts.
So I want to talk about evolution here. Okay, so evolution is a alternative to God and Torah. Why? We see a very sophisticated world, and logically we would assume, just our response with that typically would be, okay, when you see something sophisticated, you assume that there's some sort of intelligent design behind that. Everyone agrees to that principle. That would be what you would assume. What's evolution? Evolution is an engine that enables that creator, that design, to be random. Now, is it possible that evolution is true and God is true? Absolutely. So I want to make this abundantly clear. In society today, when you talk about creationists or evolutionists, they seem to imply that they're mutually exclusive. When in reality, and I'll explain this in 2 words and it'll make a lot of sense. God, that is a cause. Evolution is not a cause. Evolution is a process. Evolution describes the process of the development of the origin of species and its development to where we are today. That's what evolution is. It's a process. What's God? That's a cause. The cause could use the process.
Okay.
And they are not at all in conflict. Why are we even having this discussion? The problem with evolution is that people assume they are in conflict. And the benefit of evolution, for people that don't want the implications of God, is that evolution also can provide a cause, even though it really can't.
Yeah, I mean,
But they assume it can because people say, hey, there's so much proof of evolution. Yeah, there's proof of evolution of the process. There's 0 proof of evolution of the cause. And you know what? Evolution of the cause is so outrageous and so improbable that any healthy logic rejects it.
yeah, I mean, the people who dismiss intelligent design say evolution is totally random and there is no creator.
But why? Why
Well,
does
it's
evolution
illogical what they're saying.
disprove God? It doesn't make any sense. How does the process negate the cause?
Does not.
It doesn't. You know, if I write something on a piece of paper, of the cause, the process is the pen and the ink, paper. So say, oh, I see pen, ink, and paper. It must be that it's happened on its own. No, I employed a process to achieve the result. Who's to say that God didn't employ evolution to create the world, create organisms? Who's to say that? We have no proof otherwise. In fact, the Torah gives us 31 verses to describe Genesis. Do you think that's an exhaustive detail? An exhaustive accounting of everything that happened?
No.
Of course not. So, who's to say that he didn't employ evolution? In fact, if you actually look at the progression of species, it does start off, what's the most sophisticated species out there? Well, that's the human. Well, we're the last one to be created. It does seem to model the less sophisticated to more sophisticated organisms. Maybe indeed they're both true. Why is that not an option? Why do people seem to pit creationism against evolution? Do you know why? Because evolution is an excuse to fulfill the bias.
Do not believe in God.
Exactly, because of that option, you don't help. Evolution doesn't help us, so to speak. But evolution doesn't help people if what they really want is permissiveness. It's not going to help them if evolution is merely a process. If it's merely a process, but God is the one pulling the strings, you have the same problem. God demands certain modes of behavior. If the God of the Torah employed evolution, you don't have an excuse anymore to say, well, maybe God doesn't exist. So it must be that evolution is antithetical to God. And they are in opposition, even though it doesn't make any sense, because evolution is the process, God's the cause. But if we say that and we say, oh, there's proof for evolution, even though there's no proof for evolution the cause, because evolution the cause doesn't exist. And evolution the cause is entirely logical. We'll go to that in a second. But once you're able to say that, and you're able to muddle it a little bit, you have a perfect formula and a perfect way to get out of jail free card, right? Get out of responsibility free card. Get out of morality free card. Get out of rules and restrictions free card. Permissiveness abound. So let's talk a little bit about it. So we have this idea wherein, like we said, step one, we all start off with the idea that creation to such a sophisticated level, and even to not a sophisticated level, doesn't happen on its own. Right? This phone, this tablet, this bottle of water, the bound book, those things have to have some force behind it. And unless we thought otherwise, that force would be God. Because we see sophistication that we can't imagine how someone would do that. I saw recently a picture, this might be a little gory, I saw a picture of the surface of a living brain. I don't know if you guys want to look at it. I have it over here. Want to look at it?
Sure.
Sure?
Turn your tablet around.
Ayah.
Nice.
That's a surface of a living brain. I saw this picture, I'm like, wow, and I'm looking at the details, and all these tiny little pipes carrying blood, and you count up the pipes carrying blood, and you put them in, and you have a more sophisticated network than all the world's roads put together in one person. And you know what happens in the road when there is an accident? How many times that happen a day?
Breaks the odds
Lots and
up.
lots and lots and lots, right? What happens in your body if there's an accident, if there's a buildup in your arteries, in your pipes, in your canals? You're dead.
You're dead. Aneurysm dead.
You're dead. So we have a system that's so complex, yet operates at such peak efficiency, where there's never an accident in years and years and years and years. Imagine if I created a road system in the United States and all of the world where there's no accidents, there's no traffic. That would be unbelievable. But that happens within our bodies every single second, every day, at billions of people. Designed in a way that we can't possibly fathom. How would we do it if we tried to do it, much less how we would do it if it just happened on its own. And yet people seem to be okay with the idea of evolution, providing an answer to the source, not the process, but the source, the cause of all of the organisms and species we have today. It's remarkable. To me, if we were really using logic, if logic was a motivating factor whatsoever, the debate's over.
It's impossible.
And yet you see so many people that are believing that in opposition to God. The only way that can happen is because they already have the conclusion set. And once they're determined to get there, they'll find a way. Life will find a way. Humans are creative enough to do that. And the Almighty allows us to do that because the Almighty wants us to have that free will. There's so many examples of this idea. I don't want to get too bogged down, but the famous line of these Nobel laureates, a tornado sweeping through a junkyard. You ever heard that one? No. The likelihood of an amoeba becoming a human eye, it's the same likelihood of a tornado sweeping through a junkyard and assembling a Boeing 747.
Oh, yeah, that's good.
How about us coming from a sponge? A sponge to you.
Yeah. There's an analogy that people do. They say that if you have enough monkeys sitting in enough keyboards, they'll do the entire works of Shakespeare. Well, they did an experiment with that, and they found out that
What?
somebody did an experiment with
So
it, and
you
they found
have
out that
really
if you set the monkeys out, they actually create very few words, let alone books. And then after a while, the keyboards get so cluttered with the monkey's feces that nothing happens anymore.
Well, actually, someone did that math. What are the odds of creating one of Shakespeare's sonnets with monkeys, right? So there's one of them, shall I compare you to a summer's day. There's 488 letters. What are the odds, what are the chances of randomly typing 488 letters to produce one sonnet?
Impossible.
Right? It's a number of a 1 followed by 690 zeros. So if you were to do one of those a second, it will take you the amount of, well, there's no way to describe, right? Since 15 billion years ago, the amount of seconds we have is only a 1 followed by 18 zeros. So an unimaginably longer time than the time frame we have, right, to create just 488 words. And that we can do, by the way. Something that we can, this is a simple algorithm. Let's just work the simple mathematics. What's it easier to do? To create something with design by chance or by calculated, attempting to try to do so? What's easier?
Say calculate.
Of course. If you try to do something, it's easier to do it
Than by chance.
than by
Just
chance.
by chance, yeah.
Right? So we try to do something, and we do things like phones, right? That we can do. It's very sophisticated, right? What can we accomplish by chance? What's the maximum we could possibly accomplish? Almost nothing. Like we said, you want to have those people, those monkeys type. It's impossible for monkeys to type by chance to read to say a poem. Even a sentence. Listen to this, guys. A sentence, a random sentence with only 16 letters. It would take 2 million billion years. So we have 15 billion years? Not 15 billion. 2 million billion years for that to happen randomly. Random things don't happen. We don't happen anywhere. And yet you want to say that all this complexity that we can't do if we tried to do it, all happen randomly. I have no idea where it even, I can't talk to people.
And that's what they're teaching.
How do you have an argument with someone who's not willing to accept any logic? You can't, because you're not arguing with the same playing field. You're not talking the same language. They're determined to reach a certain end, and they'll get there no matter how irrational and illogical it may be. And more. Evolution doesn't tell a complete story. Evolution starts with point B. What does evolution start with? We have an amoeba, let's create humans. Let's create elephants. Let's create animals. Make an amoeba out of nothing. Remember, once you have God, you have all the answers. Simple, right? God exists outside of the realm of this world, is not limited by any restrictions, can create whatever he wants. But let's assume that we're not dealing with God. So we have inanimate matter. How do we make, well, first of all, how do you even have inanimate matter? It's a difficult question. Let's assume you get that, right? You have inanimate matter. How are you making animate matter? How are you doing it?
Generations of multiplication, different random acts.
So maybe, but it seems from, here we go. This is what's called the Hoyle and then Wickramasinghe. They did the calculation. A simple cell, just a simple cell, right? One cell, that's right. But bacteria, which is the simplest of cells, it's got 2,000 enzymes. What are the odds? The odds are 1 in 10 to the 40,000th. These are not even numbers we can measure. We take every single particle on planet Earth and put a 0 in it, we can't get to that number. We can't.
I don't know how they get that number.
But they did the calculation. That's even a single cell. Randomly we can't get to one cell, much less taking that one cell and turning it into elephants and mice and lions and eels and human eyeballs. It's
Well, that's
not
predicated
logical.
on that information you share. I don't know how they figured that out.
Okay, so
And
you do the research and give me the numbers. It's still whatever number you
I
get.
won't be alive by then.
Whatever number you get, it's out of the realm of possibility, and that's widely established. Everyone accepts that. That's out of the realm of possibility. So then, what do? Is say, okay, well, there's multiple billions of universes, and we have to be the right one and the right Earth that it all came perfectly. Okay, so you can't talk to someone, right? We're not negotiating with logic because that's an excuse. That's not logic.
Well, just like we accept God as being the being, there are some scientists that accept what we're talking about as being.
So that's my
That's
point
the
exactly.
problem.
My point is that we're not working with
Most of
logic. We're arguing against people that are committed to faith as, even if it may be illogical. And that's my whole point. My point is that let's assume we're pursuing truth. Where would we end up? I'll give you another example here. How much time do we have? Just according to science. I'm just working with the timeline that science is giving us, so we'll finish
What
with
time
this,
do we
guys.
end? I'm
It's
never here.
now.
Nine.
Okay, we'll finish with this. How much time do we have from when the first amoeba appears to now? Anyone knows?
A lot, but I have
Go
no
ahead.
idea.
Give a guess.
15
4 billion?
No, 15 billion is the world. There's no life on planet Earth quite yet.
I don't think it's
According to
It's
God.
4
about,
billion, I
about
think.
3.5 billion.
Yeah, okay.
So it sounds like a lot of years, but it really isn't when you calculate how many species are there. How many different distinct species are there on
It's
planet?
unbelievable, man. I don't know.
It's an enormous amount. It's about 8 million species. Okay, and they're finding more species every
Yeah,
day.
every day they find a new species somewhere else.
Okay,
But things are
And-
extinct too.
and that's the next point. And 99% of all species that have ever existed are already extinct. So if you do the math, simple math, we're talking about almost 100 million different species have to all evolve on their own without any guidance in 3.5 billion years. If you do the math, we're talking about every 35 years a new species. You're like, oh, 35 years, we could do that, right? But what does that demand? But that also assumes that the rate of evolution is constant, irregardless of the pool of biological, not primordial, but biological soup you have to play with. Obviously, the more species there are, the more varied species there are, the more evolution can happen. Thus, evolution ought to be happening now at a faster rate than it happened 2 or 3.5 billion years ago with one amoeba. One amoeba splits into 2 amoeba, maybe it does randomly after a couple of hundreds or thousands of years. You don't have enough time. You have to have an entire organism every 40 years, and you have to have evolution happening now faster than ever. And what happens? We're losing more than we're getting. So extinction happens faster than evolution. It's not possible.
I can't understand all that. I'll have to pass.
Go ahead.
We have different types of evolutions. We go from amoeba to a dinosaur, back to here, then to an ape, to a man. It's impossible.
My point is like this, guys.
And that's what they
My
teach
point
in
is that
schools.
I'm
though.
not trying to counteract evolution here. It's not my point. I'm okay if someone doesn't believe in evolution. I'm fine. You know what? If you were to ask me, how did the mind create the world? Create all the species? The correct answer is, I don't know, because we never told anywhere. And we do have some indications, like the Ramban tells us, that everything was created in day one, in theory.
Hidden.
But it was developed over the time. That sounds like evolution. That everything is there at the core, but it develops over time. I'm fine with that, as long as you have God in control. And therefore, the implications of that are the same as if God created it. Straight. We're okay with that. For some people, that's not enough. And the question is why? They have zero evidence to say that evolution, the cause, exists. Zero evidence. There's no proof of it whatsoever. Not only that, it's highly unlikely and highly irrational to say that. You're going against mathematics. Why do they say that? Why can they be happy to say God created with evolution? Why? What's wrong with that? Everyone wins. You know why they don't? Why they don't? Because what do you do then? How do you fulfill your bias? How do you achieve your stated goal? You can't. That's that, guys. Why don't people believe? The answer, the real answer, is because they don't want to believe. It's not because they pursued truth and they ended up at that goal. Because belief demands that the behavior be parallel, be in line with what you believe. And if what's logical is a conclusion that you don't like, you'll find a way to circumvent that conclusion, despite the fact that it may be entirely logical. That's that. So it is unsettling because for each one of us, we have to say, oh goodness, we have biases. No one likes to question their own biases. No one likes to do that. It's not fun. It's not fun for anyone here. Anyone in the world, really. It's very unsettling. But it's true, and we know it exists, And therefore, we have to find some way that when we make these important decisions in our lives of what we actually, how we dedicate our lives, we want to make sure that they're based on logic and based on what's more likely to be true, based on truth. And if we define some way to get that pursuit of truth, we're off and running. But we should know it's an uphill battle with lots of headwinds. It's not easy. It's not easy confronting what really is motivating us. It's not easy. If we define some way to pursue truth, everything else will already shake its way out. Everything else. But to get there, that's an uphill battle. Let's do it, guys.
Thank you.